Welcome back to Alachua Home Pros Trades Talk. I'm Ray Walsh, and I am going to talk about thermostats today. Our friends over at North Central Florida Air Conditioning was nice enough to donate a smorgasbord of stats, and we're going to go over each one and when one is more preferred over a different stat. So most of you probably have or have started with your standard non-programmable thermostat that you push it up and it gets warmer, and you push it down and it gets colder. You got a switch that you slide back and forth for cooling and heating, and they're probably the most reliable and easiest to use. The crazy thing about these is they're illegal to put in new construction or any type of changeouts. The government has changed the laws that you are no longer allowed to install non-programmable thermostats. Why, do you ask? The short answer is so that you can save energy. They want you to have a thermostat that resets when the most common times of the day it's not being used to a higher temperature to save energy on the grid. And then on the high demand, when you're home, it sets itself back. So if it's a non-programmable thermostat and that's what you want and you're changing your system out, you will no longer be able to get this. Now, as a homeowner, you still can buy them and you can change into them, but realize that you're doing is against the building code. The next ones where everyone is now moving to are what we call smart stats. And you got a whole different shapes and style of smart stats, from manufacturer-specific stats like Daikin, they have their own smart stat, to generic smart stats like the Ecobee or the Nest, to smart stats that look a little different for a little thing like mini splits or ductless. Some are Wi-Fi enabled, some are not Wi-Fi enabled. So let's eliminate the oddball out. So if you have a ductless unit or a mini split unit, sometimes they put them in rooms over the garages or places that air conditioning is hard to get to, but it's easy to put these ductless units. They normally come with a remote. Those remotes get broken or lost, can't use it anymore. You can hardwire them in. This is a Daikin controller for a Daikin mini split. It works pretty much like a normal thermostat, but it is a smart stat. It communicates back and forth, and it does a lot of smart things with it. There's a brain in here to figure out humidities and run times and all that other stuff. But it is not Wi-Fi enabled, which means you can't control it from your phone or you can't control it when you're not at the house. There are adapters you can add to things that make them Wi-Fi enabled, but normally when you make it Wi-Fi enabled, you actually move over to their smart stats. So here is a Daikin specific Wi-Fi enabled smart stat. It is required on all the very high efficiency Daikin. It's got a computer in it. It interacts back and forth with it. It does a lot of things that your normal stats don't do. There's some things called geofencing. There's humidity controls. There's different ways to set different schedules when you're home, when you're not home, when you're sleeping, when you're not. And they're able to interact with some zoning. Most of them that you're going to come across, and the most popular ones, are the Ecobee and the Nest. The Nest is now owned by Google. So Google has bought the Nest, and what Google's trying to do with its Nest is incorporate it into all your home stuff. So with your Nest thermostat, you'll be able to talk to your Google AI, and your Google then can interact with, say, any of your speakers or in your room, or motion sensors or switches or anything like that. Ecobee is very similar. Ecobee has smart switches, door locks, cameras, other things too. The good thing about these smart thermostats is they can learn your habits. So programming them can be real easy. Some of the earlier versions, you had to go in and do a lot of programming up front. Some of the versions now, they have like occupancy sensors, where it figures out when you're normally home and when you're not home, and it will cool to the settings you desire based on your habits. So if you have a routine that you use quite often, enabling that learn feature works well. If you have a bunch of people in the house with a bunch of different routines, you definitely do not want to enable that feature because it's never going to know what it's doing or how it's doing it. You would want to go in and write that programming yourself. The only other thing that you can consider is something like an Ecobee has a follow me sensor, 2 or 3 sensors you can place in different parts of the house where it will average the temperature of the house so that no one part is cooler than the other part, or it will follow you. It has a follow me mode that those sensors, so when you go into the room, and that room, let's say, is upstairs, and that upstairs room is notoriously warmer, it knows when you're in that room to cool the entire house to the temperature that you set for that room. When you leave that room and you go to the kitchen, it says, okay, now you're in the kitchen, I'm going to cool the entire house to the temperature you want the kitchen. So it's not zoning, so each room isn't cool. So certain parts of the house may get overcooled, but you're not in them, so you don't really care. It's tracking you and cooling where you're at any given time. So these are different types of thermostats. They all have different price points, starting from about $40 all the way up to some of these more advanced ones could be several $100s. Most of your install directions are homeowner friendly. The biggest thing I will caution you is turn the breaker off at the panel so the thermostat that you're working on is no longer lit up when you do your change out, because if you don't, most likely you will pop a fuse inside the unit and then you'll have an expensive service call for someone to come out to replace a fuse instead of just coming out and replacing the thermostat. But if you got any other questions about thermostats or what they can do for you, some of the options, go ahead and throw it in the comment and we will get back to you. North Central Florida Air Conditioning is always available to answer those questions. And I believe I know North Central Florida Air Conditioning does it, but if you buy your own thermostat, they come out and they install it for $99 so that you don't have to worry about, popping fuses or anything. I'm certainly, if you have a contract with other air conditioning companies, they're going to be something similar to that. Until next time, that's Alachua Home Pros Trade Talk.